Cartilage has qualities that resemble both fibrous connective tissues as well as bone. So cartilage is tough like bone, but cartilage is also flexible like many of the fibrous connective tissues that we've just examined. Cartilages as a whole are avascular, so that means they lack blood vessels. This gives them a very slow metabolism, which means that they're going to be slow to grow, as well as slow to heal if they accumulate any damage or experience any damage. Their extracellular matrix contains high amounts of a material called chondroitin sulfate, which is a material that traps a lot of water. So in fact, cartilage is up to 80% water because of the amount of it that is trapped by chondroitin sulfate. The collagen or elastic fibers that are also present in the extracellular matrix give the cartilage the properties of those protein fibers. We've seen previously that collagen provides strength against tension, so that it resists those pulling forces. While elastic fibers are very flexible, and when they are stretched, they will often return back to their original shape, just like a rubber band. So because of these collective properties, cartilage is a tissue that's going to resist both tension and compression. Some cartilages are found in places that are subjected to mostly compression, that is, those weight-bearing forces. Some cartilages are found in places that are subjected to mostly tension, so which are those pulling forces, those stretching forces, or some combination of both. So there are three types of cartilage that we will examine. We'll look at hyaline cartilage, elastic cartilage, and fibrocartilage, and we'll examine them in this order. So hyaline cartilage is the most common type of cartilage in the human body. It's going to cover and protect the ends of long bones. It forms the supportive structure of the external nose. It connects the ribs to the sternum. It forms the rings that support the trachea. And it also composes the majority of the embryonic skeleton, which will later be replaced by bone tissue. The major protein fiber type that we see in hyaline cartilage is collagen. And this cartilage tends to be very good at resisting compression, just like bone does. But hyaline cartilage can bend and has a little bit more flexibility than bone tissue does. So next we have elastic cartilage. And elastic cartilage contains elastic fibers in its extracellular matrix. And so therefore it is much more flexible than hyaline cartilage is. It has the ability to bend and then return back to its original shape. And so for that reason, elastic cartilage is not found in any of the weight-bearing locations in the skeleton. We primarily see it present in the external ear, as well as a structure called the epiglottis. So the epiglottis is a structure that closes off the trachea when we swallow, so that food is directed into the esophagus and not into the trachea. Last we have fibrocartilage, and fibrocartilage, kind of like hyaline cartilage, has abundant amounts of collagen fibers in its extracellular matrix. It is tough and supportive, but it's also fairly flexible. So it's primarily found in places where a lot of flexibility can occur. So we see it in places like the intervertebral discs, the pubic symphysis, as well as the discs that are located in the knee joint. So the pubic symphysis is a small pad of fibrocartilage that unites the anterior aspect of the two hip bones. So in females, this allows the pelvis and the birth canal to expand during childbirth. The intervertebral discs are found between most of the vertebrae in the vertebral column, and they permit the vertebral column to be fairly flexible. And finally, the meniscus and the knee joints are primarily composed of fibrocartilage discs. The medial meniscus and the lateral meniscus help the femur bone to sit on top of the tibia bone and not slide off during knee movement. So now that we've examined cartilage, we can examine bone. Bone is the hardest connective tissue. It is rigid due to the calcium minerals that are contained within its extracellular matrix. It also contains some protein fibers in its extracellular matrix, particularly collagen, which gives it somewhat flexibility. It gives it some flexibility, so it makes it somewhat flexible. Because of its rigidity, it is best at resisting compression, which are the weight-bearing forces that we place on the bones and on the skeleton. So therefore, we typically see that bone is going to form the internal support framework for the body, and it's also going to protect delicate organs. There are two types of bone tissue that we're going to examine when we get to the module on bones. We'll see compact bone, and we'll see another type of bone called spongy bone. In this example, where we've highlighted compact bone here, and compact bone is the very dense bone tissue that forms the outer walls of the skeleton. Microscopically, it's arranged in these little concentric rings called osteons, and the term concentric here just means that the rings are nested within one another. In the middle of the osteon is the central canal, which contains blood vessels and nerves. And bone tissue we see is very well vascularized with small blood vessels and small capillaries that are going to bring nutrients and oxygen to the bone cells. Speaking of bone cells, bone tissue, compact bone in particular, has a cell type in it called the osteocyte. And these osteocytes are found in small pits called lacuna that exist between the rings of the osteons. The function of the osteocytes is to monitor the extracellular matrix of bone tissue, and those osteocytes will signal to the body when bone needs to be remodeled in order to handle new or different forces or new or different demands that are placed on it. So we're going to see that the skeleton is constantly remodeling itself depending on the demands that we place on it. Our final connective tissue is blood, and blood is a very unique connective tissue in that it does not function to give mechanical or structural support. So instead, it's going to function to transport respiratory gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide. It's going to transport nutrients like carbohydrates, amino acids, and lipids, and it will also transport wastes to be eliminated. Blood will also serve as the major transporter of hormones from the endocrine system. It is classified as a connective tissue because it arises from the embryonic connective tissue called mesenchyme, so just like the other connective tissues. And similar to the other connective tissues, there are protein fibers that exist in blood. Except in blood, these fibers only appear during blood clotting. The major cell type that we find within blood are the erythrocytes. These are the red blood cells, and their primary function is to carry oxygen. We also have the leukocytes, which are the white blood cells, which are not as numerous as the erythrocytes, but they do have an important function, and they function in the immune defense of the body in order to destroy pathogens that are present in the bloodstream or in the body, such as bacteria, fungi, viruses, or even tumor cells. Cell fragments called platelets are also found in the bloodstream, and they function to form platelet plugs in order to slow or stop bleeding until clots can be formed and created. The extracellular matrix of blood is a fluid that's called plasma, and it's mostly composed of water. Dissolved in that water are nutrients, wastes, ions such as sodium and potassium, as well as small proteins.